Hey, good morning. Today's another one of our first fives. I think sometimes in life we find ourselves wrestling with the character and nature of God. We wonder, is this really who God is? Is this really how he acts in the world? If he's this way, then how am I called to live? And so there's a story in Matthew chapter 6 or Matthew chapter 26, beginning with verse 6. And it's a story of Jesus being anointed. And it's a story really that shows us the character of God, because we see the character of God in the person of Jesus. One of the most powerful things we can understand in terms of theology or understanding the nature of God is this. If we can't say it about Jesus, we can't say it about God. Because Jesus is for us God in flesh. And so this story, I think, is something that just epitomizes the character and nature of God. So here it is, Matthew 26, verse 6. While Jesus was in Bethany, in the home of a man known as Simon the leper, a woman came to him with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume, which she poured on his head as he was reclining at the table. When the disciples saw this, they were indignant. "Why this waste?" they asked. "This perfume could have been sold at a high price and the money given to the poor." Aware of this, Jesus said to them, "Why are you bothering this woman? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me. When she poured this perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for burial. To tell you the truth, wherever this gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her." Now, what's so crazy about this story is it begins by taking place in Simon the leper's house. Lepers were outcasts. There's some thought that maybe Jesus had healed Simon, and so he was known as the former leper. Doesn't change the reality of he had likely been ostracized by society. And Jesus goes to the place of the outcast, to the marginalized. And that's where we so often find him. We find him at the table at Pharisees and rulers and teachers and wealthy people. We find him at their tables too, but we also find him so often at places that others might not have gone. And so here's Jesus at the table of Simon the leper. And they're reclined for this meal together, and a woman comes in, and women didn't go where the men were in that day. They just didn't do it. And then this woman takes what is really her life's savings and she pours it on Jesus as a symbol of gratitude and love. It's a beautiful picture. And yet, there's no way around the reality that it was incredibly extravagant. It was beyond what was to be comprehended. To take one's life savings and waste it in one act sounds crazy. And the disciples are like, what in the world? We could have done so much with that. We could have taken care of the poor. And other gospels talk about that Judas was the one most indignant by it because he handled the purse strings and he liked the money. But what we see in this is that Jesus calls us to recognize there are moments in time when not only are we supposed to be with those who are on the outside and the outcast, but there are also moments in time in which extravagant love, extreme generosity, are to be modeled for the sake of others. And it often goes beyond our comprehension. But this woman who did this act, it wasn't about her. It was about her love for Jesus. And so it's not to say we shouldn't do extravagant things with money. We shouldn't be incredibly generous, because we should. We should live with open hands. And even references here, it says, the poor you'll always have with you. Well, it's a reference to Deuteronomy 15:11, but in that text, he's just referencing back to what they already know. And in that it says, have open hand. In other words, take care of the poor, because they're always going to be near. So Jesus, in this one moment, is accepting the graciousness and the generosity of this woman, and in the same breath is calling his disciples and us to lives of extreme generosity. Because when we model extreme generosity, we're showing extravagant love. And so for us, I don't think you need to go buy a life savings worth of perfume, because it's a little different in our day. But what might happen if the people of God were known for our extreme generosity? Because we have received God's extravagant love, and we then become givers of God's extravagant love. I didn't even talk about the fact that Jesus gave worth to women, in which we recognize today that we're called to do the same, that every person is unique in the eyes of God, and every person matters. This one little story is filled with so much goodness. This one little story shows us the nature and character of God, that in God's kingdom, all people are invited in, And what makes sense in our everyday lives doesn't always make sense in God's kingdom, because God takes some of what we think is normal and he flips it upside down, because that's what God does for us. He offers us a new way, an alternative way of life. He invites us to live into God's kingdom, the kingdom of God, kingdom of heaven on earth as it is in heaven. That's the invitation for you and I, to live as a people who model extreme generosity and extravagant love. May you this day know the extravagant love of the Father, who gives so generously to us. We'll see you next time.